Hi, welcome to the second part of the building instructions for the Lizard in Studio. We're going to start off here with a little mistake that I made. I forgot to add the infrared sensor at the bottom of the head. And as you can see here, I'm struggling to add the sensor because it has to be added in step 1, and somehow Studio doesn't allow me to add a new step as a first step. It only adds steps at the end. So I end up trying to add the step a lot of times and then finally just dragging it up like you see here. So I have a new step on top in which I insert the motor and the pegs like the base unit. Now I'm ready to add an axle and some bushes to attach the infrared sensor. Here you can see I'm using the recent bricks pellets to add more axles. I'm using that instead of the clone tool because the clone tool adds parts always in the last step, and we want to be sure that we stay in the first step with this infrared sensor. So now the axles are in place and we can add the infrared sensor and I'm rotating the view to make sure it's nice and centered here. And now the only thing left to do is add a little bush to fix the infrared sensor in place there. I have to check if, okay, just adding another step by putting it in the end and sorting bricks. I really try to focus on sorting the bricks while I'm building up the model, because this time I'll win it back later on when making the building instructions. If the brick order is really a mess, it takes a long time to lay out the pages and make building instructions. Okay, now we're back at the upper model, and right now we're going to build the back of the model. As you see, there are only two beams sticking up in the middle next to the big gear, and there should have been 4, so I made a little mistake here which I'm going to have to correct before going on with the back of the Lizard. So this part that I'm highlighting now is the wrong part. I'm going to have to dig them up, so I'm switching to step view, and in step view I'm sure that whatever parts I'm adding are staying in that step. So here there should have been a 4x2 lift arm sticking up, so it's symmetric, and it should have been a 1x5 lift arm going down like so. So I've added those to the right step, exiting step view again. Then I'm going to highlight the other L beam. It's automatically switching to step 33, and while I'm still in step view I can safely delete the parts. I'm using the recent parts palette again to add the needed L beams. Oh, I can see there's something wrong with the step order now, because the other L beam should have been there. Somehow it ended up in the wrong step, so I'm dragging it up. I don't know why that happened. The user interface is a little quirky, but it works. It's better and more flexible than Lego Digital Designer anyway. Okay, this brick here is floating, so we will have to play around with step orders to make sure that when we do building instructions that we attach the bricks that they don't float in space. So that's what I'm trying out here. Looks good, looks like it's buildable like this, and we can go on like so. Now most mistakes seem to be fixed here, and we're almost ready to do the back of the lizard and fix it up. There is a little problem there with the blue pin being in the wrong step. Quickly fixing it here. Okay, we're back on track. Now I'm going to speed up the video 20 times. So this is 20 times faster than reality. In reality, it took me about 3 or 4 hours to make the complete model and the building instructions. Right now we are going to see this happen in about 15 minutes with the voiceover and slowing it down for some interesting parts sometimes. As you can see, sometimes the image almost freezes. This means I'm studying the model in my hand and figuring out what a logical building order would be before going on here. Saving the model from time to time, of course. And here you can see I'm building a frame on which the EV3 brain will rest. When designing the model, it was quite a challenge to leave enough space below the frame to allow for the movement of the front legs, but also fix the turntable in 2 locations, so the gear connection would be solid. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm grabbing the front and back leg assembly with some more plastic so it doesn't bend forward while turning. Going into the sub-assembly there and back up. As you can see, snapping doesn't always work, and I'm using the translate functionality of the studio quite a lot. Okay, and the brain is on. Now I'm fixing the brain to the rest of the body, so you can actually lift the model by grabbing the brain, which is what most people do. So you want a really solid connection there. Also, I'm making use of submodels here to accelerate the build. So whenever some parts are connected in the same way but just on different sides of the model, I tend to make a submodel so I can duplicate the whole submodel, rotate it and attach it. This really speeds up the build, both in studio and in reality. Now the back is done and it's time for the head. The head was quite complex to model and build because it's full of angles. But the good thing is when some part is tilted a little bit, most pins tend to snap in quite well. So here I'm playing around with the build order again to make it logic. And now there is a bit of complex angled frame, which I'm just doing in side view until it more or less fits. And that's also a nice thing about Studio. LXF demanded exact fits, and here you can do a more or less fit, and for me it's good enough if the building instructions are clear. It doesn't have to be mathematically perfect, because I know that in reality it all works, because I've built a model for real, of course. I really wish I could mirror the whole face of the model, but alas, it's not possible, so I have to redo the whole thing again on the other side. You can see I first rotated the cheek, and then the other bricks easily snap in place. Now I made a a submodel of the head. So also builders who build this model can build the head first as a submodel and then add it onto the head. So every time here when I'm building this model, I first add bricks to the base model, and then as a last step I select a submodel and make it into a submodel. That's the easiest way to go forward. That's actually much easier than starting with the submodel right away. The back of the neck. And the first part of the tail is added here. The whole thing should be a little rotated in reality, but yeah, that's the way to do it in Studio. The hinge tool works quite nicely usually. Sometimes you have to remove some parts and then hinge it and then put them back, but usually it works quite well. So now it's onto the tail again. As you can see, I'm building the tail again as a part of the main model, and then in a later step I will select every part of the tail and put that into a submodel. Okay, there I go. That's the tail submodel. Looks good. Some more detailing. Oh yeah, that's the beam, the boom actually that moves the tail when the legs move. Making that as a submodel too. Rotating it all in place, making sure the heights all match. And then it's time to go on to the legs. This building instruction here is for an old version of the legs. In the final model I increased the strength of the legs so the lizard can walk real fast without falling apart. But yeah, that's a fix that I did afterwards. For now, this video is about learning to use Studio and making your own building instructions. The legs were quite a lot of work to build because they have all the crazy angles, and I had to tweak and rotate quite a lot until everything fit. Here again I'm making submodels on one side so I can quickly and easily rotate them and use them on the other side. The panels of course are just different bricks, so I can't rotate and reuse them. More submodel work here. While there are 4 legs, the parts for the legs are diagonally identical. So the right front paw or leg is the same as the left back, and by using submodels again and copying submodels, I can make sure that I only have to build them once. Here you can see the hinge tool going all strange, and then the only solution was to guess degrees and type them in, because just dragging the mouse leads to strange results. And I cannot build a model in straight 90-degree angles. That would be easier, but then I wouldn't be able to show all of the connections, so I have to model the whole lizard in mid-stride. Okay, back legs coming up. I'm first going to model the leg more or less straight, because that's the easiest way to add parts. And then when all the parts have been added, I'll rotate the legs so the mechanism will fit together. Now the mirror version. So you can see that I'm grabbing parts from one side and sticking them onto the other side. That saves a lot of time searching into the part library. Okay, submodel time. Now I can rotate it, hinge it, and try and make it fit. This is pretty rotten work because there are two beams that have to fit together, and it's really a lot of guesswork in the angles there. But I managed it in the end. You see, it's a lot of guessing, and this is sped up 20 times, so you can see this in reality this took a lot of time. Now it's time to go to building instructions. So we have built up the whole model, we have taken care of every step, and then Studio generates more or less okay-ish building instructions from those steps. In step editor you can move parts between steps. I'm just switching here to page design first to set some global settings, like for instance the page size and the margins and the size of new parts. A4 is fine for me. I just would like to have the blue box there a little smaller, which is what I'm adjusting now. Once we're happy with the global settings, we have to go over every page to make sure there are no overlapping boxes over the model, and that the steps are logical, not too fast, and everything is in view. Right here I put too many parts in one step, so with the step editor I just move steps forward and backward, or there is a nice button, move parts to a new step before or after, which I'm using a lot. And I'm checking if the build order is logical, more or less. Right here I'm switching the layout to 2 steps per page view, which I think is reasonable because I try to do very few parts in a step, so it's an easy build to follow. Okay, set a default scale here, and really this is just a matter of adjusting the view for every part, dragging parts out. Here again the parts are covered, and this is a complex part, so I temporarily switch the layout back to 1 step per page. Here boxes cover each other, cover the model, drag everything around. It's some maintenance really, but if we want nice building instructions, all of this has to be done. You can see that because I built the model very carefully and paid attention to making new steps when necessary and putting not too many parts in steps and making steps reasonably logical. That going over every page takes very little work here because the basic steps are more or less in order. Sometimes I save and reload the model after a little break. That's what you can see. That's why I'm going out of the page design view. This is sped up 20 times, 800%. So this kind of work takes a lot of time, and sometimes I just need a little cup of coffee. Sometimes, most order problems are easy to solve in the step editor, but sometimes I put the wrong parts in a sub-assembly, so that's also another reason to step out of the building instructions editor and go back to the model to switch around parts from the main assembly to a sub-assembly or a sub-sub-assembly or vice versa, so the building instructions are logical again. I'm nearing the end here with the building instructions for the legs. Here again, a build order issue that I fixed. And we're almost there. I think the whole building instruction is 280 something steps. Okay, we're at the last step. Now we can just export the whole building instructions as PDF or PNG. Here I'm choosing PDF because I'm sending it to a friend for testing the building instructions. It's a good idea to have them tested to make sure there aren't any mistakes or inconsistencies in there. Well, this pretty much concludes the studio tutorial and build video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it, and you will be making your own building instructions soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.